welcome. And the whole country is talking about the much-anticipated Hyundai IPO, which opens for subscription tomorrow. I'm Samina Nalwala, and over the next half an hour, we will analyze for you whether or not this makes a good investment for you. First up, remember, Hyundai is one of India's largest and most awaited IPO of our times and is slated to open for subscription tomorrow, which is Tuesday, the 15th, and will conclude on Thursday, October 17th. The price band of this issue is in the price range of 1,865 to 1,960 rupees, with a total issue of 22,870 crores. 8,000 odd crores is slated for the anchor investors, which opens today, and we'll by later on in the day have more details of which anchor investors have subscribed to this much anticipated IPO. Well, before we go into the conversation with our analyst, Puneet is joining me with more details about the business and who its competitors are. Hi, Puneet. Thanks for joining in. Puneet, you know, Hyundai is a household name worldwide. We do understand it's an MNC that's looking to list in India. This is also one of the largest IPOs of our times. While we know what the business does, you want to tell us a little bit more about the details of the business, the space Hyundai operates in, what does it have to do with the parent company, and of course, why is it looking at a listing in India?
Yeah, I think the last question is the most interesting, right? Because they're listed, of course, in the Korean stock market, but they've chosen to list in India. And, you know, when we spoke to the management as well, they said they wanted to Indianize the business. I think that's the focus that, you know, India is a key focus market. They've spent 20 years in India. And it's imperative to see that, you know, the kind of achievements that they've done in the last 20 years, but specifically, you know, if you look, as you rightly said, you know, the upper price band is around 1,960. It's the largest issue, upwards of about 27,000 odd crores that the company is looking to raise. And today is when the anchor book opens. So anchor book will be about 8,300 odd crores. So it's a big anchor book. By the end of the today, we will get to know what's the investment by the by mutual fund guys and other big investors looking into the IPO. That's going to be the first indication to look at. But it's also key to see that, you know, about the company as well, because in the fiscal year of FY24, specifically between April 2023 and March 2024, the company sold about 7.7 lakh units, and that was the second highest by any other car maker in India. The highest is, of course, Maruti Suzuki, but Hyundai came at roughly about 7.7 lakh units that they sold in the last year. And what's also heartening to see is that out of that, 24% was exported out of India to other countries such as Southeast and Southeast Asia. So that's one of the key things. They are the highest exporter of cars out of India. That's higher than Maruti as well, who has around 10% of the total cars they produce. When you look at the growth as well, compared to the last year, it was about 7.2 lakhs in 2023, so about a 10% growth that they managed to do. And apart from that, when you look at Q1 numbers as well, which we got in the RHP filings, that's also shown a 5% growth. That's higher than, you know, its peers such as Maruti, as well as, you know, someone like a Tata Motors as well. Just converting that to, you know, the financials aspect as well. For FY24 specifically, they reported roughly 69 to 70,000 crores of revenue, while margins was one of the main things that I want to talk about. It's 13.1% for FY24 specifically, and that's higher than roughly 12.5% that the company reported on margins in FY23. Now, we look at the profits as well, roughly about 6,000 odd crores of profits that they did for FY24. And in Q1 as well, the margins have grown by roughly 150 basis points to come in at 13.5% for Q1 FY25, while profitability has also grown by roughly about 6 to 7%, coming in at 1,489. So that's just roughly putting in a picture of the sales as well as how does the financial look at for someone like a Hyundai India.
Right. You know, before we go into comparing it to its peers, they are looking to raise upward of $3 billion, which is 22,000 crore rupees. That is, of course, by selling 17.5% stake in the India division, valuing the business at a whopping $19 billion. What is the plan of allocation of these funds? So if they successfully raise the 23,000 crores that they're looking to raise, what are they planning to do with the money? Any idea?
I think one of the major things that we talk about in this IPO, it's completely offer for sale.
So it's basic.
It's a complete OFS, no fresh issues. So no amount, whatever is raised in this IPO will not go to the company which is listed in India eventually, which is Hyundai India. So basically the global parent is going to take forward this particular amount that they are raising. And that's also as part of the value unlocking process is what the parent has said. So they are looking to list in India, Indianize the business, but majorly it's an OFS completely of such a big amount.
Right, and that's what could be something I'd raise an eyebrow to be honest, right? Because there is value unlocking, and the parent is looking to make a little bit of an exit here. But let's go across to Vineet Bulinchkar, Head of Research at Ventura Securities, and Puneet Gupta, Director of Indian ASEAN Automotive Market and S&P Global Mobility. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today on the show. Vineet, I'll
Good
start with you
afternoon.
first. This is the largest IPO of our times. Hyundai IPO in the early part of this month was going through a lot more excitement and enthusiasm amongst retail investors. But as we get closer to tomorrow when the subscription opens, what are your thoughts and feelings? Are you excited about this IPO? Are you recommending it to your clients?
More than Hyundai, if the market is able to absorb this IPO and stay there, maintain valuations overall of the market, I think that will be a great thing for the Indian markets, considering the, when we are verifying the depth of the Indian markets. So to that extent, I think it will be a great thing. On the valuation part, I think the valuation is kind of steep, leaving very little for the investor on the table. So to that extent, I don't think that this IPO will, excite me too much. Third thing is that, as far as the performance is concerned, we believe that the market trend can sustain for Hyundai, given the fact that, they're adding capacities and already most of their plants are at peak capacity utilization. So adding capacity will help them push volume, and increasing premiumization, export, and sedan to SUV trends are going to benefit the company to grow. So growth is not a criteria. Margins will also expand, but I think that the valuations are a little too steep, and hence leaving very little upside for the investor.
Mr. Gupta, thank you for joining us. And I'll start with you as well. What are you making of this beast of an IPO that is going to open to subscription tomorrow? This is the largest of our times and comes from an MNC. The last one that was this big was an LIC. How do you feel about Hyundai? What do you feel about the business model? And also your thoughts on the fact that this is going to be an OFS, which also means that all the money raised is going to make its way into expansion.
Right. So I think if we talk about Hyundai, 25 years back when Hyundai entered, they really transformed the industry. And today, how I see Hyundai is, that India is at its, inflection point in terms of car sales. Clearly, if you see number one and number two today, number one, Maruti Suzuki sells around 1.5 lakh cars a month, whereas Hyundai sells around 50,000. So you can clearly see the gap between number one and number two. And clearly, this IPO will bring, obviously right now that entire money may not come directly for investments, but I think what we can really see is the kind of trust what consumers will have, the kind of trust what supplier partners will have, the kind of trust what Hyundai will have in India. Because obviously still they have a big portion of Hyundai India for sale, going forward. So I think clearly I see them, clearly because we track more from an automotive market perspective, so I can clearly see Hyundai has a lot of potential here, because there are a lot of segments, white space, which is yet to be unexplored. For example, mid-size SUVs. So Hyundai doesn't have any product like Scorpio XUV 700, which is clearly a white space today. They don't have any adventure off-road SUVs like Thar, which is itself becoming a big cluster segment today. So similarly, Hyundai exited, a small car segment. So there is a clear potential, because currently Maruti is only the player which is having a lion's share there. Then EVs is big thing, and clearly India being a diverse market and a need, and there is a diverse, pocket size, diverse need. So primarily, Hyundai being a global organization which has access to all technologies, it may be hybrids, it may be PHEVs, it may be electrics, so Hyundai has a potential, to invest in those technologies, even in India, localize them in India, and also export from India. And one thing which I think one of the panelists also said was, that Hyundai, when they entered India, and there was a time when they were also exporting 40 to 50% of the cars which they were making in India for the global markets, right? So, but now, if you see their exports have gone down to less than 20%. So clearly, there is a huge potential for India. And primarily, this is the step one. But going forward, we can see, them exploring different segments, different powertrains. I think in India, we are talking about powertrain pluralism, where, where there is a need for multi-fuel types, they can invest in R&D in a big way, because we have seen players like Renault Nissan, how they're exploiting the Indian manpower, because, and then we have a lot to do with AI and IT going forward. So I think Hyundai has a long way to go in India, and obviously I think this IPO will help them really take a big leap, from 50,000 wherever they are today to the next one.
Well, it also shows and brings in vested interest from retail investors who would want to participate in the long-term growth story of Hyundai. Vineet, but let's talk about valuations. Some argue that this subscription is priced to perfection, so there's not too much room for investors in the near term to make a quick buck. So if you're looking at this subscription, you may want to look at it from a long-term time horizon. Would you agree with me, Vineet? Do you feel like the upside may be capped at least around listing?
So, we did some number crunching, and based on our internal assessment, what we think is, we are getting a, post-listing market cap of about 2 lakh odd crores. That works out to about 2,500 crores on the listing basis post IPO. Here we have assumed that they will do about 5,000 crores of capex. But if you simply take the capex to 8,000, the value of the business on a cash flow basis comes to about 1,900 to 2,000 bucks. So if that were to be the case, then it remains fully valued. So for a IPO of Hyundai size, if you're getting just a 20% upside from here, it'll be very quickly caught in. And I think our estimates earlier, when I told you about a 2,500 value, was that the capex would be minimal. But if you consider the outsized capex giving the new capacity that is coming up, it could lead to lower returns on the stock.
Puneet Gupta, what do you think? Price to perfection is what some argue. Do you agree? Do you feel like this is a well-priced subscription, and that may mean that in the near term, you may not see too much upside on the counter?
Yeah, so generally we stay away from, commenting on the commercials, but definitely, I can see that Indian auto industry is growing, right? So we are talking about almost, from the 5 million cars or light vehicles today to almost 7.5 million in next 10 years, and obviously Hyundai being number two, so they have a clear potential to grow, and clearly one thing which I really want to point out is, that even the average size of the car, average price of the car today in India, which has gone up to like $15,000. Just 10 years back, it was roughly around $8,000. So I think clearly in terms of margin, profitability, average price of the car, India now stands quite attractive for Hyundai, and obviously if you localize, and specifically with the support from government of India, government been pretty proactive in terms of production linked incentive scheme, which I think Hyundai is yet to explore, most of these schemes. But I think they can clearly take out the advantage, invest in India in big way, and clearly, churn out, and being a very attractive proposition for the consumers. Because one thing we should not forget, right? We are talking about 1.4 billion people, whom really India needs to mobilize, and with the aspiration rising of an average Indian to own a car, so clearly Hyundai is one of the players which really understand the pulse of the consumer pretty well, and clearly have been able to give the products just in a line to the need of the consumer, and they are priced little premium also, to their competitors. So I think clearly there is a big market size. I think clearly a profitable company, for the investors, and for the retail investors. Yeah.
So Puneet and Vineet both sound constructive on this one, but Puneet, I'm going to come to you now, and Mr. Gupta, just bear with me, we'll come back to you in a minute as well. Puneet, how does Hyundai compare to its listed peers like Maruti and M&M? I know M&M is an expensive stock, but so is the growth.
Yeah, definitely. I think M&M, as you already said, more pricing in the premium model specifically. But for Hyundai, they sell roughly, we spoke about 7.7 lakh units. They're roughly one-third of what Maruti does. Maruti sold about 21.3 lakh units in the previous year. But I also want to look at the revenue, right? So despite selling 3 times the volumes of someone like a Hyundai, Maruti has doubled the revenues, but margins are lower than compared to someone like a Hyundai. So Hyundai had reported roughly 13.1% margins, while Maruti was at about 11.7%. And while you see that, Mahindra has higher margins, they also have, products in the premium category, as well as the tractor division, where the average selling price of the total automotive division goes higher as well. Specifically, I've also carved out the profit as a percentage of the total revenue as well, and that's one of the key metrics that I want to talk about, because that, when compared to someone like a Maruti as well as M&M, is much higher for Hyundai, coming at roughly about 15%. And this is based on the FY24 numbers. So that's one of the key positives as well. Comparing on like-to-like basis, the profitability has been strong for someone like a Hyundai. The market cap also, as you know, the indication is on the upper price band, and the 14 crore shares that they are selling, it comes to about 1.58 lakh crores. When you compare that to Maruti, Maruti is upwards of about 4 lakh crores of market cap, while Mahindra and Mahindra is also inching towards that, 4 lakh mark. It's taken over from Tata Motors. And the reason why Tata Motors is not in this particular list is also because it has the JLR division, and that is, roughly 70% of their total revenue. So when you look at the current price to earnings, and we'll go back to our guest as so for this, it's currently coming at roughly 26 times for Hyundai. When you compare that to Maruti, it's around the similar range of 27 to 28 times price to earnings for FY24 specifically. While Mahindra is currently priced at a premium, and that's because some of the models like the XUV 3XO as well as the XUV 700 has done well. But for Hyundai specifically, as our guests have been pointing out, their products are priced at a premium because of the confidence that they have been able to instill over the last 20 years that they've been operational in India. So let me just go back to Mr. Gupta and just talk about the valuation as well, which he spoke about, as well as the, a segment that they are very strong at, which is the compact SUV segment. They operate the Exter as well as the Venue there. And there they have, Mahindra is still getting into there with one of their products, but it's been able to capture and essentially create a market with that compact SUV segment. So talk to us on, valuations for someone like a Hyundai going forward as well, because that is in line with Maruti, while also having another big addition, which is the compact SUV space, something that Maruti is not currently present at. It has the Fronx, but that's of course priced above 8 lakhs. So talk to us on these two aspects, Mr. Gupta.
Yeah, so I think from compact SUV segment, clearly Hyundai is a winner, right? And obviously, if you compare it with Maruti, but I think one best thing about Hyundai is, that they are always able to sell, their cars at a little premium, in a specific segment, and they are also able to create new segments, which is like if you see Hyundai Creta when it came, Grand i10 when it came, i20 when it came, so they were the first movers in their respective categories, and actually they moved the market, and rest of them actually followed. So similarly, I think in terms of overall sales, so obviously in terms of future products, I think the best part about Hyundai is, that they clearly have technologies with them. Today there are a lot of companies who are banking on just maybe one diesel fuel, right? So obviously the risk element with those companies can be relatively higher. But if you see player like Hyundai with get hold of technologies like PHEVs or HEVs or EVs, so I think they may have, going forward, a more stable and a much more profitable, a direction. The only thing is that obviously they have to work in that direction, to make the things more profitable. But otherwise, obviously, if you see average price of the car, Maruti versus Hyundai, definitely, Hyundai scores above Maruti, but if you compare it with Mahindra, so Mahindra is much higher than Hyundai there. So I think clearly Hyundai have scope to both increase average price of the car, means give better offerings to the Indian consumers in terms of mid-size SUVs or adventure SUVs, and parallelly they are one of the OEMs which can actually grow, in terms of market size, and really compete with players like Maruti Suzuki and take, because as I said earlier, right? So if Maruti sells 1.5 lakh vehicles a month, Hyundai just sells less than 50,000 a month. So clearly there is a big gap, which obviously Hyundai as a OEM would like to explore, obviously apart from exports, which they can really plan to build on.
In fact, my colleague Sajit caught up with the management of Hyundai India and began by asking about the factors that drove one of India's largest automakers to finally go public. Listen into that slice of that conversation.
One reason for success of HMI in India has been our ability to spot the trends. When we launched the Creta in 2015, the SUV contribution was only 13%. True. Who would have thought that a car like Creta can sell 15,000 vehicles a month? But we were able to do it. Today, if you see our SUV contribution, in fact, January to September period has already reached 68%, right, much higher than the industry average of 52%. In fact, in September, it reached 70% for the month of September. So you can see that there is still some upside. We launched the Exter last year, which really had a very good response. We had 6 airbags as standard, which has really helped us to really touch the heart and the mind of the customers. So we believe that there is still upside to it. At the same time, we don't want to be only a 100% SUV player. We are very strong in the sedan space as well. We have the Aura and the Venue. We have in the hatch segment, we have the Nios, the i20. So we are a complete player with different kind of powertrain as well. In a country as big as India, one solution will not work. So at the entry level, we are offering the customer petrol and CNG. And you can see the penetration in models like Aura of CNG has reached 85%. In the SUV segment, we offer the customers petrol and diesel. In the Verna segment, we offer the customers petrol and turbo. And of course, we have an Ioniq 5 as an EV. So I think this kind of different kind of powertrains to different kind of geographies, because Indian geographies also behave very differently. Like somewhere in UP, CNG is very, very popular. Whereas in Telangana, Andhra Pradesh and Punjab, diesel is very popular. In Delhi, petrol is very popular. So different powertrains, different segments help us to really, really grow. SUV segment, I think, like I said, we have always been very, very bullish on the SUV segment, and going forward also we'll see what kind of opportunities exist. Of course, competition is always there, Indian markets has always had competition, but we believe as long as we are able to identify trends, as long as we are able to give new features, new technology, I think we can always get the love and affection of the customers.
Well, that's the management extremely optimistic and, of course, talking to us about the future and the commitment to grow the India market. Vineet, as we wrap up this edition, what is your recommendation? Do you have a subscribe rating on Hyundai's mega IPO that opens tomorrow?
So, we would like to sell on listing is what we are advising our investors.
Subscribe, but sell on listing. Puneet, what do you think? What is your recommendation with the way valuations are and the price band the subscription is opening at? Do you recommend our viewers to subscribe to the Hyundai IPO?
Yeah, so I think, as I said, so India is a great automotive story and Hyundai is a part of this story, and that too, being a number 2 player, so they really they really can have a head start. So clearly, I believe, in the Hyundai India story, and obviously, I think it should be a win-win for everybody who should be a part of this story. Yeah.
Vineet, just one follow-up, because you didn't mention the sell on listing days for any kind of gains, but because of the size of the IPO, and previously we've seen for LIC as well, that generally these kind of IPOs don't get a lot of listing gains. So is there any kind of listing gain that you are anticipating, and hence the rating that you've given on a selling on the listing day as well?
I think 10 to 15% upside is max what we are expecting.
But for the long term, you do prefer to keep something like something like a Maruti or something. Is that the
Definitely, we like Maruti. We believe that Maruti is absolutely underpriced, and we have a target of 14,500 on the stock.
Well, thank you very much. That's the view coming in. Vineet Bulinjkar has a subscribe to Hyundai IPO, but does believe that it could see a 15 to 20% upside on listing day and could be a listing day gain story. Puneet Gupta, on the other hand, believes that this is a great story to be invested in and has a subscribe to the Hyundai IPO. With that, we're completely out of time. Thanks for watching, and of course, keep your eyes tuned in for that big mega IPO that opens for subscription. Thank you.